Union Baptist, the church that loves like Jesus. I've preached in a lot of churches in America, but I've never met one that loves like Union Baptist. And so it's always good to be home in my home church in New Jersey with my pastor, Reverend Dr. Campbell Singleton III. Holding down 4 generations of a legacy with Campbell Singleton IV. And I bring greetings from my wife Sarah and son Tristan Troop, who's 19 months and wakes me up at 6:15 every morning. And also greetings from my senior pastor, Kaji Dosha, at Park Avenue Christian Church, and from New York Theological Seminary, our president, Dale T. Irvin, and academic dean, Kirkpatrick Cohall, both American Baptist ministers. And so it's really good to be in this prophetic Baptist assembly today. On this MLK worship weekend, we pause to remember the one who wanted to be remembered as a drum major for justice. How do we keep the faith-rooted struggle for justice alive? How does our Christian faith inform our activism today? What is one concrete thing we can do in 2018 to keep hope alive? This morning, let us reflect on these questions with the Acts of the Apostles, or what we could also call the Acts of the Holy Spirit. Because my fundamental contention this morning is that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not just a preacher and activist, but he was a theologian. And he had a constructive pneumatology where he was working out a doctrine of the Holy Spirit through this concept of revolutionary spirit. So as a minister in the Christian church, Disciples of Christ, that came out of the Cane Ridge revivals in Kentucky in 1801, trying to restore the primitive church based on the New Testament, we always go to the book of Acts for a lot of our theological inspiration. And so I came across a passage in chapter 17 that really inspired me. And as Michelle Obama said, when Trump goes low, let's keep it high. And I want to bring y'all a word of inspiration this morning. So in Acts 17, 1:9, we see an account of the Apostle Paul's mission to Thessalonica. The Apostle Paul was a courageous and creative missionary who traveled throughout the Mediterranean, sharing the good news that Jesus the Messiah had come. Thessalonica was a seaside town, the second largest city in Greece to Constantinople, which we know Constantinople will become the center of the Eastern Orthodox Church in Holy Byzantium. But the second largest city in Greece, even today, is Thessalonica. And sometimes when you're second, you have a little independence from the first. And there were some folks in Thessalonica who were radicals and had a spirit of freedom and independence. So much so that even though these two towns were under Roman rule, there was a time in the 300s where there was a group in Thessalonica called the Commune of the Zealots. And being named Peter, I have always been very partial to the Zealots, because while the Pharisees and the Sadducees will fight about the law and the Essenes will retreat into the mountain, when someone comes at Jesus in the garden, the Zealots advance. And so Michael Jackson said he was a lover, not a fighter, but I'm a lover and a fighter. And there were some fighters in Thessalonica, and I believe there are some fighters in Montclair, New Jersey. So, as was his custom, the Apostle Paul would go to church every Sunday. He went to the synagogue, and for 3 weeks, he got into a debate with the rabbis. And his fundamental thesis was that Jesus was the Messiah, the one who the prophets had promised, and the one who would suffer and be raised from the dead. So it's interesting to ask an intellectual question about what arguments would Paul marshal when he was trying to make this theological case to fellow Jews from the Old Testament. And what I think was really important to him, one passage was Isaiah. In one passage he might have brought up, since it said that the Messiah would be one who suffered, would be Isaiah chapter 53, where it talks about he suffered in all the ways that we did. And in verse 3, it says, twice in the Greek is this term Christos, which is the Greek term for the Hebrew term Messiah, meaning anointed one, a title given to one sent by God to liberate humanity from the power of sin, evil, death, and the devil, and the curse. The Messiah was used to designate the Davidic king who would restore God's reign of righteousness and justice among the people of Israel, as we see in Isaiah 16 and 32. And since I moved to Washington Heights, my building now is largely Orthodox Jew. So I'm going through all of the Jewish festivals, Rosh Hashanah and Passover and the Festival of the Tabernacles, and learning all kinds of stuff. And my physical therapist, Ari Reisner, is Jewish, and he's also lives in my building. And so we get into a lot of theological debates all the time, and I'm really trying to understand how Messiah was conceived in the Hebrew Bible. But what we find in Thessalonica is that the way they hear this term, Jesus Christos, Jesus the Messiah, is that they're hearing it as king. Or we could put the terms today as president. That Jesus is our president. And when these new believers, 1, 2, 3 weeks old in Thessalonica, were going around town spreading a message that had been preached to them by Paul and Silas, saying, Jesus is president. Some folks in the town heard that message. They did not like that message, and they took it as an offense. They heard the proclamation, Jesus is our president, as a threat to what they thought Thessalonica should be. And what they did is They got so upset. It said they went to the marketplace and organized some of the ruffians to go over to Jason's house, who had entertained the strangers. As we know in Abraham and Genesis, it says, entertain the strangers, because you may be blessed with angels, is how they phrase it in Hebrews. And that's the hospitality code. The brother Jason was living out the faith and opened his house. They said, go attack Jason's house and bring us Paul and Silas. Now, all I can say is when they got there, Paul and Silas had gotten out of Dodge. But there were some who were left behind, including Jason and some of the believers. And it said they picked them up and dragged them through the streets to the authorities. Now, I know what this looks like because on Thursday, I was at a protest for Ravi Ragbeer. It was actually a prayer vigil at the ICE building, 26 Federal Plaza in New York City. My friend Ravi, who's from Trinidad and Tobago and has been in the United States since 1994, when I graduated from college, and has been married to an American woman for 8 years and has an American child and goes to church every Sunday at Judson Memorial Church. President Trump and ICE, which stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, are trying to deport him. Just like they did with Jean Montreville, another friend who's Haitian. And on January 3rd, Jean drives a van for his job, and he came back from work. He parked his van, and then he walked to his apartment. And while he was walking 1 block away, a black van pulls up. 4 guys get out, grab him, throw him in the van, and take him down to 201 Varick Street. So last Friday morning, I was marching around 201 Varick Street asking for my Haitian brother Jean to get out. And then this Thursday, I'm at 26 Federal Plaza praying to God. We did a Jericho walk 7 times silently around the ICE building. Silently, we didn't say a word. The city of New York has brought in some of the best urban planners, construction workers, and developers because they say the ICE building is sinking. And what I'm saying is, we are not going to stop this struggle until the walls of oppression come tumbling down. We're going to keep on talking, keep on walking, marching on to Freedom Land. Now, I want you to know, on last Friday, when we marched around 201 Varick Street for Jean Montreville, a Haitian brother, guess where they took him? A few miles from here, Essex County Correctional Facility. Hundreds of immigrants are being detained in New York City every day since January 1st and shipped off to Essex County, New Jersey. And so that is close to home. And we need to start to understand what's happening in this country. When 2.5 weeks ago, Trump says, I'm going to deport 45,000 Haitians, and then 2 weeks later says, I'm going to deport 200,000 Salvadorians, And I'm going down into this activism, and I'm starting to see things from a different light because my friends are getting deported. So when we made the 5th lap around the ICE building, we got a text from the inside that ICE is going to detain Ravi. And my heart was broke, and my spirit was woke, and I was mad as hornets. And I've lived in Zimbabwe with the Ndebele people who descended from the Zulus. And what started as a prayer march in silence, you know, we got our sword of the spirit and began to start making some racket with the rhythm of the movement that it's time to roll. So we closed out the lap and went into Foley Square, and then some of the clergy, like my pastor Kaji Dosha and Donna Scopper, and some of the elected officials like Corey Johnson, the new speaker of the city council, Jemani Williams, and my council member Udonis Rodriguez, came out into Foley Square, and they said, Ravi, when they told him that he was going to be detained, he passed out, cold, in his chair. They're going to take him out in an ambulance, and there's only one exit out of the ICE building. It's like a driveway. It's an incline that comes up from the basement, up like that. And so we all, like 1,000 people, ran over to that exit. And so the ambulance comes in, and the clergy are praying, and other people are trying to block the van and see if Ravi's okay. And he's in there. He's okay. He's got his handcuffs on. And they drive down to Broadway, and some of the folks are trying to block the van, including my council member, Udonis Rodriguez, and some others sat down in the street in front of the van. Now, I was like in the rear guard, and I saw an ICE officer, it said Department of Homeland Security, hit this little old lady into a car. She fell down under the car, rolled under. Myself and a few other people pulled her out, helped her up. There was blood coming from her face. And the officer said, "Do you need an ambulance?" And she wouldn't answer. And then I went to try to intervene. I said to the officer, "What's going on?" He said, ask her if she needs an ambulance. I said, "Ma'am, would you like an ambulance?" She said, "Reverend, tell that officer I want him to get out of here and I'll be okay." And so I delivered the message, and he fell back. And then we took her, because it was like a car parked on the road, to the sidewalk, and we had medics with the march that were there to help take care of her. So once that scene, the triage was all right, I moved on in to the march, and then, well, I was talking about Udonis Rodriguez, my council member, sitting in front of the ambulance. Well, what happened is they grab him and start dragging him through the streets. And this video is on the New York Times website. And Jemani Williams described this as dragging folks through the streets like rag dolls. And I had never seen anything like this in my life. And it was the closest thing I had witnessed to a lynching, where people were not being treated like they had dignity and sacrality and fellow humans, but they were treated as, they say in the ICE building, Ravi Ragbeer is going to be detained. Please remove the body. They don't even consider you a person anymore. And we're seeing that happen in the streets of New York, not just with the ICE agents in the Department of Homeland Security that I saw knock over women like outside linebackers in the NFL. and those guys were particularly brutal, but even the NYPD. And there was one cop that they called the choker cop that would just go at protesters right in the throat and take them down like that, including my friend, fellow clergy, Reverend Juan Carlos Ruiz. And then Lieutenant Rich Mack put my council member in a headlock, which we know from Eric Garner, I Can't Breathe, in 2014, that is an illegal maneuver according to the protocols of the NYPD. So this was a very tough prayer march turned into protest on Thursday in New York City. But the fact that I saw my own council member, who's a Dominican brother from Washington Heights, representing Washington Heights and Inwood, dragged through the streets like that, broke my heart. And we get a sense of what's happening in Acts when it says they dragged Jason and his house through the streets. And what did they say about them? They said that what these guys are guilty of is turning the world upside down. Now, what does it mean to turn the world upside down? I think this is what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. means when he talks about revolutionary spirit. To turn the world upside down is an example of this revolutionary spirit, which for Dr. King is the Holy Spirit that is flowing through the faith-led movement for love and justice. And what Dr. King says is, our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and to go out into a sometime hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism. Dr. King called on Americans to recapture the revolutionary spirit and to go out and dismantle the social sins of racism, poverty, and the war economy. What does Dr. King mean by revolutionary spirit? Because we all are down with the spirit. I mean, not everybody, but the black church, Pentecostals, disciples of Christ. But what's holy about the Holy Spirit? And I think it's the